Hello. In the last presentation, I shared with you about the best way to write college admissions essays. For this short presentation, I thought I'd at least generally go over the other things that colleges look for. For some of you, you're probably familiar with this. For others, you may have heard some things from your guidance counselors. But I just want to kind of put it all together to maybe give you some perspective on, all the different things that are required or important when you are applying to colleges. We've already talked about the essay, so I'm not going to talk about that in great detail. Obviously, first one is your high school record, what your grades are, what other things you've done in high school. And those are important. Your attendance even can sometimes make or break an admissions decision. But if you get decent grades, that's a sign that you are working, that you are steady, that you have a certain amount of self-discipline or whatever. And so high school record is certainly important. Especially if you're applying to a college that is familiar with your school. If, for example, you are in a certain state, and you're applying to the state college, chances are they already know your high school and have an idea of what students from your high school are like, and how well academically, anyhow, they can do at the particular college. In other cases, it may be less critical. Certainly the type of classes you take. Obviously, if you're applying to a technical school, they're going to look at your math and science grades and what level of math and science you've taken. More competitive colleges will be looking for advanced placement and honors and or international baccalaureate, something like that. So your high school record it certainly speaks to them and tells them something about your academic potential. Recommendations are important. If you can find someone that will write a good recommendation for you, this can really help you. One strategy I recommend to students, and I don't often think of that, if possible, find someone with connections to the school. If you have a teacher who attended the school that you're applying to, and then you think the teacher can write a decent recommendation for you, ask that teacher, or an employer, or someone else. That can make a big difference. I think one reason I got into the school that I got into was that the two teachers that I asked to write recommendations for me had attended that school. And remember, the idea is to make a good match. If they attended that school and they think that for one reason or another you wouldn't fit in there or you couldn't make it academically, and they say that in their recommendation, that's not a bad thing, because you want to find a school that's right for you, that is going to be a good academic match for you, and also with a campus culture that you would be comfortable with. Now, some schools and some programs, particularly some scholarships and things like that, require certain subject teachers. For example, if you are applying for a military scholarship or applying to one of the military academies, they always ask for math and English. So keep that in mind too. And also think outside school. Think of your employer, a coach on a team, a scoutmaster, a clergyman. There are other people that you can ask to write recommendations. I think when I think of my own experience, I can remember asking a scoutmaster for a recommendation. I can remember asking the pastor of the church that my family attended for a recommendation. And that can help as well. Extracurricular activities and extracurricular skills can make a difference as well. Obviously, someone who's state ranked or nationally ranked athlete or something is probably going to have scouts looking at you or that kind of thing. But even perhaps more mundane things that you might not think about as being particularly significant. But if it is a job you have or a certain hobby you have, that tells them that you are an interesting person, that you have maybe something to contribute to the campus culture that other people wouldn't have. Also, I do want to warn you that some schools see through padding. If you have a whole list of different things that you claim to have done or done, a lot of times, they will they'll see through that, and they'll say, oh, this person has done too much, or this person is just doing this to impress us. I have my own little personal experience with that. On my application, for my college application, it asked for hobbies, and one of my hobbies at the time was bird watching. Some people may laugh at that, but I grew up with that. My father used to do that, and I tell people, how did you get interested in birds? And I said, well, some fathers take their sons fishing. My father took me birding, and so it was something I knew. And one of my college interviews, the interviewer had my application in front of him, and he said, oh, you're interested in birds? I said, yeah. He said, what's this? I said, oh, it's a white-throated sparrow. And he nodded. He said, yeah, okay, I guess you do know something about birds. So obviously that wasn't padding. I guess I passed the interview. So, but anyway, just be aware of that. Okay, obviously your application. Be sure to proofread it. If you have misspellings or things that are done sloppily on the application, that's going to make a difference. Now, the common application that a lot of students use has certainly simplified things in some ways. You can fill out one application and then use it for a number of different schools, and that really does make it convenient, especially on the internet. You just press a button and there it is, the application goes to the school. But it is complicated in other ways, and that is because it has made things easier. Schools are getting a lot more applications than they used to. Back when I was in high school, I think that most people just applied to 2 or 3 colleges. Maybe 3 was kind of a standard. You got kind of a stretch school, a school that you pretty sure you can make into, and a safety school. And that was pretty standard. I can remember I had one classmate who applied to 5 schools, and everybody thought that was extreme. Now it's not uncommon for students to apply to a dozen different schools, and so that has made it in some ways a little more complicated. Beware of what college counselors or admissions counselors call an airdrop. Whatever school you apply to, make sure that you've done something to contact them before you submit the application, whether it's asking for a catalog or giving your name to them, maybe talking to someone at a college fair, something like that, but that they already know your name before you make the application. Otherwise, they're able to say, well, who's this person? Why, what do we know about this person? He hasn't visited us. He hasn't requested an interview. Hasn't even asked for a catalog or gone on our website or anything. So, and also be honest. In my state, there was probably the most prestigious university in the state. Made the news a few years ago. They had a student who was a sophomore. She had already been there for a year and a half, and they discovered that she had lied about something on her application. One of the questions they asked And it's not something that's going to necessarily keep you from getting admitted, but it's pretty routine. They ask if you have any kind of criminal record. And this woman had a criminal record, but she said she didn't. Now, I can tell you, my own school, I knew I had at least 2 classmates that I know were ex-convicts that had spent time in prison before they went to college. And I mean, they were still accepted. And, as far as I know, I know one of them graduated. One of them I knew pretty well. I assume they both graduated. And, they were reformed, led a life as good citizens after college, and it looked like this woman was doing the same thing. That she had changed and so on, but because she had lied on her application and they found out, they kicked her out, even though she had already been there for 1.5 years. So be honest in your application. Okay, your interview can help. The interview, a lot of times, especially if you ask the interviewer questions, the interviewer a lot of times can tell whether you are a match for the school or not. Here's the school principles or policies. This is the school's mission statement. That kind of thing. How do you fit in? Now, a lot of times students will come away with the interviews, oh, I was so nervous, I blew it. They understand that. They understand that students can be nervous when they go to an interview. Hey, I'm nervous making this little video. But also, the truth may come out if your application is not honest. I gave you the example of, okay, I wrote that one of my hobbies was bird watching. And, he tested me on that, and I passed the test because I know something about birds. But the truth, if you did pad your application with things that maybe were marginal, the truth may come out if they ask you questions during your interview. But the interview a lot of times is helpful for both parties. The interviewer to see if you are someone who would be a good match for the school, but also you sometimes talking to the interviewer, you can say, hey, maybe this place isn't for me. Because remember, the idea is to get a good match. Obviously, your SAT or ACT scores, any advanced placement, IBS scores, those can make a difference. And especially with grade inflation, this has become more important. I attended high school in the 60s, and back then, C was an average grade. I mean, it said on the report card, C is average. And if you did a bell-shaped curve of the students in the class, you'd probably see that, there were, a good number of C's in the class, because that would, but there became kind of in the, particularly in the 70s, kind of this, I suppose you could say, self-esteem movement. So at a lot of schools, a lot of teachers, it's very rare to get anything below a B. Sometimes, especially if the college you're applying to is not familiar with your school, they may look at you and say, oh, this person has all A's and B's. Well, where do they fit in nationally? We're not familiar with this school. Maybe they've had some serious grade inflation at the school or something like that. And so the SAT or ACT can be more important. Clearly, if you're applying to a school that is more familiar with your school, say people from your school attend that college every year, they probably have an idea of what the grades at your particular school is like. And especially critical, like if you're homeschooling or something, been homeschooled, that anything that's nationally normed is going to make a difference. So, don't don't overlook that. Alumni connections. I mentioned earlier, if you're applying to a school and you know someone that can write a recommendation who went to that school, that helps. But also, if someone in your family went to that school, that makes a big difference as well. I once had a student, really kind of humorous. She was really worried about, there was a school she really wanted to go to. She was concerned that her SATs weren't high enough to get in. I think she had pretty good, she was a good student and had pretty good SAT scores, but she was concerned about that. And it was so funny, both of her parents went to the school, and 3 out of her 4 grandparents went to the school. And not only that, but one of her grandparents, my understanding, was quite wealthy, and I suspect probably was pretty generous in donating to that school. And I kind of thought to myself, and kind of joked, I said, all you have to do is write your last name on the application and you're in. That might be a slight exaggeration, but those kind of things do help. Something that admissions counselors may not admit, but it is a factor. In fact, I had a friend who was an admissions officer at a pretty prestigious school, and he said, I would never say this publicly, and we were just chatting about stuff, and said I'd never say this publicly or anything, but if we're trying to decide between 2 students and one of them comes from a wealthy family and one of them is not so wealthy, we probably would take the one who was wealthier because we figured they could pay the tuition. And I said to him, well, how do you know? And he said, well, a lot of times we can tell by the address, by the town they live in, or even sometimes the school they attended. So that can make a difference. And in fact, just this year, I'm speaking in 2022, Wall Street Journal had an article that said that it's very difficult for middle class people to get into Harvard. I mean, that was just from analyzing their admissions criteria. Quotas, another thing a lot of schools don't admit or will try to gloss over. In fact, there have been some court cases on this recently. Some schools have regional quotas or ethnic quotas, depending on looking at the school population, whether the person would add the diversity to the school population. In some cases, whether or not you're a state resident. Some state schools, you have to be admitted to the state college if you have a high school diploma from that state. That's not always the best thing to do. Again, you look for a school that's going to be a good match for you. Some of those schools that accept everyone from the state, a third of the freshman class end up dropping out because it was a mismatch. So, but those quotas can make a difference, and most schools have them. The desire to attend other plans, other schools. How badly does this person want to come here? That's why I say that airdrop that I talked about earlier is not particularly helpful, because they say, well, why is this person applying here? We don't know anything about him. What do they know about us? Do you have other plans? What other schools have you applied to? And that can make a difference. When I was applying to college back, I went to interviews at one college I had applied to, and let's just say this college was competing with another one I had applied to. I mean, they were both about equal academically and so on. And both schools have a pretty developed alumni network. And when I went to the interview, one of the first questions the person asked, well, I heard you applied to such and such a school. If you applied there, why are you applying here? And they were just doing that to find out, what my desires were. How badly did I want to go to their school? and that can make a difference. Sometimes, again, if they're deciding between two people and they say, well, this one really wants to go here, heck, we have a program that this person really likes, and I think this will be a good fit, whereas the other one, I'm not so sure. So that can make a difference as well. Whoops. Okay. How you fit in with the student body and the school mission can make a difference. I talked about that in the last one a little bit. Is this person really a good match? Obviously, if it's a religious school, do they subscribe to our religious beliefs? Sometimes, there may be a certain school culture or a certain mission statement that this person may not really subscribe to. And remember, the idea is to get a good match. Something that wasn't the case when I applied to colleges, and that is your online trail. They will check you online if they see you have pictures of you playing beer pong or something like that. May not be a good idea. Be wise in what you post online. Remember, college is expensive these days. Maybe, this is not meant to insult anybody. Maybe there is an alternative other than college for you. Maybe that's what you should think about. And the important thing, after all, is finding a good match. College is not like getting married, but it's still like finding a good match. So, thank you very much, and good luck on your college searches.